In a quiet village surrounded by dense forests, whispers spread about a girl named Xena, born with a strange mark on her hand, a mark that glowed faintly whenever the full moon rose. One night, as shadows danced beneath the moonlight, the glow grew brighter than ever before, and with it came a chilling howl from deep within the forest. That was the night everything changed. The villagers called it the cursed mark. It burned on the back of Xena's hand, a swirling flame, faint but alive, like it had a will of its own. Whispers trailed her wherever she went. The small village, hidden among thick forests and rolling hills, was quiet, but the murmurs always found her. Some avoided her altogether. Others looked at her with pity, like she carried bad luck in her veins. Xena tried to act like it didn't bother her, but deep down, the whispers clung to her like shadows. She told herself it didn't matter, yet now and then, when someone's gaze lingered too long, she felt that familiar sting of doubt. Her grandmother, Nana Cora, was the only one who didn't fear her. She treated Xena like any other child, with love and warmth. But when it came to the birthmark, something changed. Whenever Xena asked about it, Nana's face would harden, her usual calm replaced by fear. She'd grip Xena's hand tight, her voice lowering to a whisper, "Stay close, Xena. Stay close to the village, especially during the full moon. There are things in the forest you cannot understand." Xena nodded every time, but she never stopped wondering. Why did Nana act so afraid? What was out there? One evening, under the bright glow of the full moon, Xena felt something strange. As she finished her chores, a sudden warmth spread across her hand. She glanced down and gasped. Her birthmark was glowing, pulsing like it was alive. It felt as though something was pulling her, calling her toward the forest. Her heart raced. Fear whispered in her mind, but an urge stronger than fear pushed her forward. Ignoring Nana Cora's warnings, Xena quietly slipped out of the hut. The night was cold, and as she moved toward the woods, the familiar sounds of the village faded away, replaced by an eerie silence. Only the wind remained, whispering through the trees like a warning she didn't understand. As she ventured deeper into the forest, something strange happened. She began to hear whispers. At first, they were soft, like leaves rustling in the breeze. But soon, they grew louder, clearer, until they seemed to be calling her name, Xena. Xena. She tried to stay calm, but the pull grew stronger, leading her deeper into the woods. Suddenly, she saw it, a towering, ancient tree standing alone in a clearing. Its bark was dark and twisted, covered with glowing symbols that shimmered in the moonlight. Xena's breath caught in her throat. Her birthmark burned brighter. Slowly, her hand trembled as she reached toward the strange tree. The moment her fingers brushed the bark, a deep, rumbling sound echoed from within the tree. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and before she could react, something cold and strong gripped her wrist. She gasped, turning quickly, and found herself staring into Nana Cora's fearful eyes. Nana Cora's voice was trembling. "Xena, you shouldn't have come here." Her face pale. She pulled Xena back with surprising strength, her grip firm. Back in the hut, Nana Cora lit a lantern and placed it on the table. The flickering flame cast long shadows on the walls as Xena sat by the fire, still shaken. Nana Cora's hands trembled as she poured a cup of tea. For a long moment, she said nothing, her gaze distant, as though searching for the right words. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with worry. "Xena, there's an old story, a story that even the oldest villagers fear to tell." She paused, looking at Xena's glowing birthmark. "Long ago, before this village was built, there was a creature called the Shadow Beast. It thrived on fear and darkness, spreading despair wherever it went." Xena leaned forward, eyes wide with curiosity. She asked quietly what happened to it. Her grandmother replied, "Our ancestor, Kaya, a warrior brave enough to stand against the darkness, found a way to trap the Shadow Beast. She sealed it inside that ancient tree, using a spell so powerful that only her bloodline could keep it bound. The birthmark you carry, Xena, is the mark of that guardian. It means you are the last in the line meant to protect the seal." Xena's eyes widened as she stared at her hand. "But why now, Nana? Why is this happening to me?" Nana Cora shook her head, her expression grim. "I don't know, kid, but something is changing. I fear the Shadow Beast is stirring. And if it escapes..." She didn't finish, but the fear in her voice was enough. "If it escapes, it won't just destroy our village, it will bring darkness to the whole world." Just as Nana Cora finished speaking, a loud knock shattered the quiet of the night. It wasn't a soft knock, it was urgent, heavy, and sent a chill down Zena's spine. She glanced at her grandmother, whose eyes were now filled with unease. Zena whispered, "Who could it be at this hour?" Her voice barely audible over the pounding door. Nana Cora rose slowly, each step filled with caution. She opened the door just a crack. Standing outside, half hidden by shadows, was a cloaked figure. The dim moonlight revealed nothing of the stranger's face, only the deep folds of a dark cloak swaying in the wind. Without stepping inside, the figure spoke in a low, gravelly voice, "The seal is weakening. You must prepare the girl. Time is running out." Before Nana or Zena could ask anything, the figure turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving behind only a cold gust of wind and a deep sense of dread. That night, sleep didn't come easily to Zena. She tossed and turned, her mind racing with questions. What did the figure mean? Why her? Was the seal really breaking? Suddenly, everything went quiet. Zena found herself standing in a vast, shadowy plain. The ground beneath her feet was cold, and above her stretched a sky dotted with strange stars she didn't recognize. The air felt heavy, pressing against her skin. From the distance, a figure appeared, cloaked in silver light. It didn't walk, it glided, as if carried by the wind. Its voice echoed all around her, soft yet commanding. "Zena, the seal is weakening. If it breaks, the shadow beast will be freed, and your village will be lost." Zena's heart pounded, but she stood her ground, listening carefully. "To stop this, you must find 3 ancient relics hidden beyond the forest. Only then can the seal be strengthened." Zena opened her mouth to ask something, but the figure raised a glowing hand, silencing her. "You must act quickly. Danger lies ahead, but so does your destiny." Before Zena could say a word, the figure began to fade, its light blending with the dark sky. Everything around her swirled, faster and faster, until she found herself back in her hut. Gasping for air, she sat up, her breath coming in quick bursts. Her hand was burning hot, and when she looked down, her birthmark was faintly glowing, pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart. Fear clung to her, but so did something else, a sense of purpose. The vision wasn't just a warning, it was a call. There was no turning back now. She had to act, no matter how dangerous the path ahead might be. At the break of dawn, Zena packed a small satchel with a few supplies, bread, dried fruit, and water. She tightened the strap across her shoulder, her heart steady but alert. Her destination was the Cave of Echoes, a place Nana Cora had once warned her about, tucked deep within the hills beyond the forest. The journey wasn't easy. The path twisted through thick woods and jagged rocks. The morning breeze cooled her skin, but as she climbed higher, an eerie silence fell around her. Even the birds stopped chirping. All she could hear was the crunch of dry leaves beneath her feet. When she reached the cave, she stopped and stared. The entrance loomed tall and dark, with strange symbols carved into the stone, symbols eerily similar to those she had seen on the ancient tree. A chill crept up her spine. "This is it," she thought, clenching her trembling hands. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The air grew colder with each step, wrapping her in a chilling embrace. Shadows flickered along the walls, and soon, she began to hear it, the whispers. They were faint at first, like a soft breeze rustling through leaves. But the further she walked, the louder they grew, coming from everywhere at once. "You are weak. You will fail." The voices mocked her, growing louder, more vicious. Suddenly, the cave walls warped, and illusions surrounded her. She saw the villagers turning their backs on her, fear and hatred in their eyes. She saw Nana Cora falling ill, frail and helpless. And then, emerging from the ancient tree, she saw a dark figure with glowing eyes, reaching for her. Zena's breathing quickened, fear gripping her chest. The whispers pressed down on her like a heavy weight. "Maybe I will fail. Maybe I'm not strong enough." But then, she remembered Nana Cora's words. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. Closing her eyes, Zena took a steady breath. She focused on the warmth of her birthmark, letting it guide her forward. Ignoring the illusions, she pressed on. Step by step, the whispers faded until she reached the heart of the cave. There, resting on a stone pedestal, was a glowing crystal, shining like a tiny star. Xena stretched out her hand, and as soon as her fingers touched the crystal, the cave fell silent. The cold vanished, replaced by a calm warmth. The first relic was hers. With renewed determination, she retraced her steps, and when she emerged from the cave, the morning light bathed her face. She took a deep breath of fresh air, grateful to be outside again. But there was no time to rest. Her journey was far from over. Xena's next destination was the River of Secrets, said to be guarded by a powerful water spirit. The river lay to the east, miles away through the dense forest. As she walked, the trees around her seemed darker, their branches curling like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, and a strange stillness settled over the land, as if the forest itself sensed the growing threat of the shadow beast. When she finally reached the river, she paused, her eyes widening in awe. The water was so clear it reflected the sky perfectly, as if the river were a giant mirror. A soft mist hovered over the surface, giving the place an otherworldly feel. Xena stepped to the edge and called out, her voice steady but respectful. "Spirit of the river, I seek the second relic. Please, show yourself." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the water rippled, and from its depths rose a figure. It was a woman with shimmering silver skin, and hair that sparkled like sunlight on rippling water. Her eyes were sharp, piercing through Xena like she could see into her very soul. "To claim the relic beneath my waters, you must answer my riddle," the spirit said. Her voice both melodic and commanding. Xena swallowed hard but nodded. "I'm ready." The spirit smiled faintly and began, "I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with wind. What am I?" Xena frowned, thinking hard. The river spirit watched her patiently, but the longer Xena hesitated, the more the water began to churn, growing restless. The pressure mounted, each second feeling heavier than the last. Then, a memory surfaced, the whispers in the cave, how they echoed all around her. Her eyes lit up with realization. "An echo," she said softly at first, then louder, more confident. "You are an echo." The spirit's eyes softened, and a calm smile spread across her face. "You have answered wisely, child. The relic is yours." With a graceful motion, the spirit pointed toward the riverbed. The water parted, revealing a second glowing crystal, this one shining with a soft blue light. Xena reached down and picked it up, the cool surface pulsing faintly in her hand. "Thank you, spirit," she said, bowing slightly. The spirit nodded once before melting back into the water, disappearing as if she had never been there. Xena stood by the river for a moment, gripping the second relic tightly. 2 relics down, 1 to go. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, she had come too far to turn back now. Xena felt a flicker of relief as she made her way back through the forest. 2 relics down, 1 to go. The hardest part was behind her, or so she thought. Her steps quickened, eager to return to Nana Cora and complete her quest. "Xena." A familiar voice rang through the trees. Turning, she spotted Bako, an old friend from the village. He was tall and lean, with that easy smile she had always trusted. "I heard about what's happening," Bako said, jogging up to her. "Let me help." Xena hesitated, surprised but hopeful. She could use the help. After all, she had faced danger alone for too long. Maybe having someone by her side would make things easier, she said by nodding all right. Together they set off toward the final relic. At first, things felt normal. Bako was chatty, asking about her journey and the relics. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, something about him shifted. His eyes gleamed strangely as he glanced at the glowing crystals in her satchel. "You don't understand the power these relics hold, Xena," he said quietly, his tone no longer friendly but cunning. "With them, we could control the shadow beast. Imagine what we could become." Xena's stomach tightened. "This isn't about power, Bako. It's about saving the village." But before she could react, Bako lunged forward. He shoved her hard, knocking her to the ground, and grabbed the satchel. Without a second glance, he fled into the dark woods, the crystals glowing faintly in his grasp. Xena lay there for a moment, bruised and shaken. Tears stung her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "I can't stop now. I won't let him ruin everything," she whispered fiercely, clenching her fists. With determination burning in her chest, She stood and began to chase after him. Night had fallen fast, draping the forest in an unnerving darkness. The air felt thick and heavy, as though the forest itself sensed something terrible was about to happen. Xena pushed forward, heart pounding, eyes locked on the faint glow of the relics ahead. Far ahead, Baco reached the ancient tree, the very one where the shadow beast had been sealed long ago. His breaths came in ragged gasps, but his eyes gleamed with greed as he laid the relics on the ground. This is it, he muttered to himself, lifting the third relic high. The crystals began to pulse, sending waves of light through the ground. But instead of reinforcing the ancient seal, the light turned black, creeping like ink into the earth. The runes on the tree flared briefly before cracking, releasing a deep, bone-shaking rumble. By the time Xena reached him, it was too late. The ground trembled violently, and with a deafening crack, the ancient tree split open. From the depths of its hollow core emerged a towering figure cloaked in shifting shadows, the shadow beast. Its form flickered between solid and mist, and its molten gold eyes burned with a terrible, ancient rage. With every step it took, darkness rippled outward. The grass withered, and the air turned icy. Xena shouted, "What have you done?" Fear and anger mingling in her voice, Baco turned to her, wide-eyed and frantic. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was trying to control it." He clutched the third relic tightly, but it was clear now, he had no control. The greed that once fueled him was replaced by sheer terror. The shadow beast growled low, its voice deep and echoing, as if it came from the very core of the earth. "Foolish mortal, your greed has broken the ancient seal." Baco stumbled back, fear paralyzing him, but Xena's mind raced. She knew that if the shadow beast wasn't stopped, it would bring ruin not just to the village, but to the entire land. "Baco," she called out, forcing him to focus on her. "Give me the relics. We can still fix this." But before he could respond, the shadow beast raised one massive hand, and with a flick of its claw-like fingers, a wave of dark energy shot toward them. Xena dove to the ground just in time, but Baco wasn't fast enough. The blast sent him flying backward, and the relics scattered across the ground. This is it, Xena thought, scrambling to her feet. The final battle had begun, and she had only one chance to set things right. Xena took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing herself between Baco and the towering shadow beast. Her hands trembled, but she raised them in a gesture of peace. "Wait," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. "Why are you here? What do you want?" To her surprise, the shadow beast didn't attack. Instead, it paused, its glowing golden eyes narrowing as if it were studying her. Then, in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder yet carried a deep sadness, it said, "I was not always a beast. Once I was the guardian of this forest, its protector. But I was betrayed by those I trusted, and they bound me in darkness, trapping me within that tree." Xena's heart raced. The old stories had painted the shadow beast as a monster, an evil creature bent on destruction. But now, seeing it up close, she realized something else. This wasn't a mindless destroyer. It was a cursed guardian, bound by grief and betrayal. "You don't want to destroy the village," she whispered. "You just want to be free." The shadow beast inclined its head slightly. "But your friend's greed has weakened the seal. If the curse's power isn't contained, it will consume not just the forest but the entire village." Xena turned to Baco, who still clutched the third relic. His hands trembled, his face pale. "Baco, please," she pleaded. "Give me the relics. We can still fix this." Baco hesitated, his expression torn between fear and guilt. I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered. "I just wanted to prove I wasn't weak." Xena stepped closer, her voice soft but resolute. "It's not too late, Baco. Strength isn't about power, it's about doing what's right, even when you're afraid." Slowly, Baco extended the relics to her, his head bowed in shame. Xena accepted them, her grip steady despite the weight of the task ahead. She turned to the shadow beast. "If breaking the curse is the only way, I'll do it. Take the relics and my strength. Just promise me one thing, protect the forest and the village." The shadow beast's eyes softened, and it gave a solemn nod. "You are brave, child. Your selflessness honors those who came before you." Xena knelt, placing the relics in a circle before her. Closing her eyes, she focused every bit of energy she had, feeling the warmth of the glowing mark on her hand spread through her entire body. Slowly, the relics began to hum, their light growing brighter and brighter until it filled the entire clearing. The air shimmered, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, with a deafening crack, the curse shattered like glass. The darkness that clung to the forest dissolved, and in its place stood a radiant figure, a majestic guardian spirit made of golden light and mist. Its once shadowy form was now pure and luminous, radiating warmth and peace. The forest, once dark and decaying, sprang back to life. Flowers bloomed, trees stood taller, and the air felt fresher than it ever had before. Xena opened her eyes, exhausted but filled with an overwhelming sense of peace. The guardian spirit lowered its head in gratitude. "Thank you, Xena. The curse is broken, and I am free. You have shown courage, humility, and kindness. These are the true marks of a guardian." With the shadow beast transformed and the forest restored, Xena and Bako made their way back to the village. Word of their journey spread quickly, and soon, villagers gathered around to hear the tale of how Xena had saved them all. Though some still looked at her birthmark with lingering caution, most now saw it for what it truly was, a symbol of bravery. Even Bako, once driven by greed, stood humbly beside her, admitting his mistake and vowing to help protect the forest alongside her. Nanakor embraced Xena tightly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You have done more than I ever hoped, my child. You've proven that even in the darkest times, light can shine through if you have the courage to believe in yourself." That night, as the village celebrated, Xena stood quietly at the edge of the forest, gazing toward the distant hills. She knew her journey wasn't truly over, there would always be new challenges ahead. But now she understood something important. True strength isn't about power or control. It's about perseverance, humility, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the odds are against you. And so, Xena's story became a legend, passed down for generations, a tale of courage, kindness, and the unbreakable spirit of a young girl who refused to give up.